It's really interesting to listen to everyone's version and everyone's take on this topic. And I suppose it is a really, really complex topic. If you think about historically education coming from the Industrial Revolution and how that, the community responded to that. If you then think about the current revolution, technology and communication, and if you think about the speed with which that's happening, and how the teachers and educationalists have to respond to this, it's quite challenging. And Casteria, you touched on some great things there about parents and the fact that their, expectations are around academia instead of actually some of the practical living skills. And Gary, you talk also, I know, and write about the social emotional learning. And all of these things are great burdens to teachers. And I work as a diverse learning teacher, and even that in itself, special needs, inclusion, diverse learning, the changes are quite representative. The terminology changes are quite representative of the ever-increasing opening of the scope of what's needed in order to, in fact, personalise education for students. And the expectations on teachers have increased. There was mention of the data. And I become really disappointed when I hear how disappointing education is for some students. And I suppose I still feel hopeful because there is a push to child-centeredness, because there is a push to social and emotional learning and well-being. And here in Australia, and I know globally, well-being has become quite a big deal. And that says to me that we are starting to understand that things like empathy and kindness and compassion and living skills and creativity and thinking are becoming more important than the text. We haven't responded as a system enough yet. If you think about our top end of education before university, it's still very examinable, exam-based. And I suppose the ultimate goal would be to open up the accessibility and the ways that students can represent what they know. And if we start really very early in allowing children to develop their passions, meanwhile we're teaching them about life and how to relate and how to get on in their world and be good and kind human beings. The idea that we would flip that system on its head economically is just not viable. We all know this.
Spot on.
We also understand that change is on the cusp. And I guess for me, the ultimate goal would be that we involve some of the teachers who are on the ground in helping develop some of those changes. They are the ones struggling with anything from 13 to 40, I heard someone say, students in a classroom with incredibly complex students. And I think there's a few things that we need to think about here. Schools are not responsible for educating children. The community are. It goes back to the village.
Yes.
Yes, schools are, I guess, flagged as the ultimate responsibility. Parents are the first educators, and as a parent, I know that. It really starts and stops with us and how we can then access. I suppose one of the things I find great joy in is being able to assist teachers to work with parents to navigate that system. And I go back to Gary's point about wanting more business-minded learning, I suppose. And I sort of open up the conversation there that perhaps businesses could then share some of that responsibility by entering into conversations with educationalists to help them to access both money and skills. And so I guess I'm looking at more community engagement moving forward as the ultimate goal here. We have the ability. We're proof of that. We're here from many diverse angles of the world and I guess the system or systems, and yet here we are communicating. It's about really being logical about who would be involved in those deeper conversations. And we may well look at planning, going back to basics, but it will be a very gradual, long process. We can't afford that. There are students in classrooms now who have trauma-based backgrounds and very complex learning needs. And so I guess the first thing we can do is support teachers, involve more community support, and perhaps even money from that angle, and then be quite methodical about how we move forward. The thing that concerns me is they're often in response to some of the global and economic changes. There are sweeping changes that come through, and everyone is expected to jump on board.
Yeah.
They're dealing with enough in terms of teachers in dealing with data analysis, evidence-based learning. You know, if you think about how many elements of a child's life that a teacher would touch on, and there's no doubt that they are significant in each child's story, but it is a bigger story than that. And I would love to see groups sit down together and just understand a bit more how uniting on that front as a community would really change the outcome. We keep hearing stories about we need more of this and this, but that unity around those discussions. The trouble with it is it's often people who aren't directly involved with working those children who do have those conversations. And I still feel very strongly that the system I work for has a lot of good to come from, you know, day-to-day workings. But without real connectivity, I do think we're going to find more barriers. And
Very well said.
That really concerns me. I'm hopeful because I still have a lot of people asking the right questions. The fact that these conversations are happening is, you know, I'm hopeful of positivity. But I think ultimately creativity is going to be the best way forward to start opening up how we think and how we action those things in terms of changing educational outcomes for students. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be done, but I'd really like to see some of the teachers working with students as part of that conversation in some way to be represented, and not just hearsay, really their opinions to matter.
Exactly, and you brought up a very, very important point prior to this, Karen. You know, there are so many people out there who basically love to pass judgment when they're standing on the sidelines, but you know they don't really understand, you know, the crux of the matter, that, you know, the real life stuff, you know, because especially in education, you know, sweeping changes, as you mentioned, is not the way forward. You know, you've got to make gradual, smaller changes, right? You can't just sort of just go like, you know, snap your finger and be like, you know, everything's going to be changing from tomorrow. It can't work like that. They have to be gradual changes. And you know, you brought up such an important point regarding, you know, community engagement and community, you know, how the community can actually work together, you know, both from a professional and a business perspective, which they can actually work with schools. Because I think education, in my opinion, even today, is one of the least funded aspects that any government does. So, you know, I think, but that is that is perhaps the most important segment that any country should look into. And thank you so much for providing all your insights, Gary, Kasturi, and Karen. Really, really appreciate it. So thank you once again for letting us know your views on where you think education has been in the last 10 years, 15 years of your career, and where do you think it should go to. So really appreciate your inputs on that matter.
Thank you.